Welcome to 52 Miniatures. My name is Alex. Today I'm going to paint a big Tau model from Games Workshop that I just got from my local friendly game store, Alphaspel. The first Tau I've ever painted. It's summer and it's raining, so it's not like there's anything better to do. This is a big model that looks like a mix between Transformers and Gundam. I want to share a simple, no-fuss painting tip that I think is great for armored type models like this one. Or for armored sci-fi troops, mechs, tanks, vehicles, even buildings. After that, I'm also going to paint some camouflage, slightly more on the high fuss side, I'm afraid. I'm also going to talk about if my paint job has ruined this model. But let's get straight into it. Normally, I'd start by introducing my project at length, the backstory and ideas leading up to the painting. Now we're going to jump straight into my armor painting tip to then take a step back for the backstory and the rest of the paint job. I started with a neat little sub-assembly, not gluing in the head or the shield to make things slightly easier to reach while painting. And in a surprising but lucky parting of clouds, I must remember to make an offering to the painting gods. I primed everything outdoors using rattle cans. The battle suit and shield black and the head brown. I'm going to paint the majority of this battle suit with the Feldgrau from Army Painter's new historical range, the muted green of Second World War German uniforms. Any colors work for this technique, but optimally you will want a dark, mid and light tone of the color you're going for. I'm going to use a sponge to apply the paint. This is foam from packaging, but a kitchen sponge should work as well. I force a bit of the sponge into one of the round plastic tubes that protect the bristles of a brush when you buy it. Cut the sponge to shape and then attach the tube to the back end of the brush. My sponge stamp tool. I dilute the dark Feldgrau paint with a bit of water so that I can work up coverage cumulatively and smoothly. Thick paint would leave too much of a bumpy stamped-on texture. I dip the sponge in diluted paint, soak up excess on a piece of tissue, and then start stamping on the paint. What I'm after is to try and cover everything like a base coat, but leave the crevices so that they still stay black. But this kind of happens automatically when using a sponge technique like this. The sponge simply won't go into the crevices, so neither does the paint. Unless, of course, there's too much paint in the sponge. I don't necessarily want a crisp stamp from the sponge like you would if you wanted to make something look chipped or damaged. I'm after a varied surface with depth, almost like a pearlescent look. For the harder to reach areas, I make a slightly smaller sponge as well. And if the brush handle gets in the way, you can just hold the plastic tube itself. After the first layer, I move on to the mid-Feldgrau, again diluted with water. It's difficult to give a precise dilution recipe because it depends on what brand and what type of paint you're using. But I'd say I'm probably adding 30 to 40% water to this Army Painter paint. This time I tried to be a bit more sparse with the application, aiming predominantly for the edges of the model but also adding a little to the speckled look all over. Paint when wet can look brighter than when dry, so don't be afraid if the effect looks a little too stark while painting. After this, I move on to apply a wash. This is a greenish-brown wash, military shade that suits my Feldgrau. I add just a bit of water to not make it too overpowering. The wash will tie everything together, darken it a little bit, but predominantly I'm after something that flows into the little panel lines that miniatures like this often have. Panel lines that I've stamped over so the fine detail has kind of been lost. I then go back in with the sponge, the mid-Feldgrau again, and touch up the very edges once more. This could be done with a little bit of a slightly brighter paint mixed in, kind of depends on how much your wash has darkened down the original work. And now we have this wonderful speckled armored surface. It's got depth and looks really interesting without being super damaged or chipped. And it's efficient. For me, there's a lot of other details to paint on this miniature, and for extra finesse, I will edge highlight the armor with the light Feldgrau later on. But if you're working on an army or something, this not only looks good, it's rather swift too. Now, let's go back just for a bit of a proper introduction. I'm terribly uninformed in everything Warhammer 40k, and I've kind of dismissed it in favor of other games. But it is the biggest miniature game in the world, and this makes me intrigued. There must be something in it, right? So I initiated a collaboration with my great local friendly game store, Alphaspel, in Stockholm. Go there for all your hobby needs. Anyway, the collaboration. Staff at Alphaspel get to pick a favorite model, and I paint it, and then we display it in a cabinet at the store for the kids to hopefully say, wow, and keep the interest in the hobby growing. I also read up a little about the models while painting, get to know Warhammer a bit better. So I guess we're now also learning a bit about Tau. This is Commander Farsight I'm painting, and it was picked out by Jon at Alphaspel. The Tau are an alien race, bipedal, kind of humanoid looking, but blue. My model might look large, but that's because it's a huge battle suit with the little Tau guy inside. The Tau apparently developed from Stone Age to highly developed spacefaring race in only about 6,000 years. They are the most benevolent of races in the grimdark future of 40k, as in, the orcs just crash in and kill everyone. The Tyranids crash in and eat everyone. The Imperium of Man just blows up your planet because you're a heretic. And well, the Chaos guys, they probably decide to play a bit with your private bits in a vice first, before they kill you, eat you, and then blow up your planet. The Tau, on the other hand, will invade and say, join us or die. Kind of the old and truly tested Roman Empire approach. Benevolent indeed. My model displays the style of the Tau well, sort of Eastern-influenced sci-fi samurai-ish meets cyberpunk anime. Commander Farsight is a military genius, Mr. Tactical, as opposed to Commander Nearsight, who still can't remember where he put his optics. There's also this all-over militaristic vibe about the Tau. Other races kind of fight for fun or need or greed or for their god or demon, but the Tau feel a little more like a traditional professional military might. Often you see them painted sci-fi white or orange or red or ochre, but because of the very organized and tactical vibe, I thought why not turn it into something with a bit more of a classic military look. And so enter Army Painter's new historical World War II range, the German edition. For full transparency, this was sent to me by Army Painter to test out, but I've not had the chance up until now. So to keep things simple, I'm going to use only the paints in this box for this paint job. Also, Mr. Farsight is a rebel. He's turned against the Tau Imperium by denouncing their way of life and so on. And so what better for a guerrilla rebel than a nice piece of World War II camouflage? I really did have an internal debate about this. Would painting Tau like its alternative 1947 ruin the sci-fi look of the miniature? And I have no clue of how to go about painting camouflage. I don't want the kids in the game store to go, why did he dip the miniature in the wet palette, Mum? Or maybe he just sneezed paint. But you know, at the end of the day, one of the most fundamental things about this hobby, brush licking aside, is that it's each individual's opportunity to do what they feel like with their own miniatures. If I want to paint a Tau from 1947, that is exactly what I should be doing, even if I fail at the camouflage. Because there's not really any right or wrong, and there's not really any failure. As long as I'm sitting down painting, I'm winning because I'm practicing my hobby. Sometimes I forget that it is the act of doing the hobby that is the hobby, not the result of it. It was, however, difficult. I decided to try and go for one of the dotted style camouflages seen on the paint box. Achtung, Spitfire! Painting on some blobs of brown, sand and green, and then adding in dots of the same colours. So one thing about camouflage that is difficult is the shape of the blobs. Never feels quite right. The other is how to not make it look flat. It should be darker in the shaded areas, have some kind of highlights, but that's very tricky with the camouflage thing going. So I covered it all in a brown wash and then tried to sort of highlight the original colours. At the edges of the blobs, more so on the edge of the shape of the armour. Reapplying or reinforcing the dots. Kind of silly to have to do that. I wasn't massively pleased, but I felt like I'd learnt a little bit at least, and felt that this all might not look like a Tau in the end, but I'm having fun doing it, at least. After deciding what other areas should be camouflaged, I moved on with an improved method. First concentrating on the colored blobs, starting with the brown, shaping the brown blobs in a slightly Y resembling pattern. I remember I'd seen Peachy over on Peachy Tips doing something similar on regular 28mm camouflage troops. When all the colors were in place, I then went over them with a brown wash to darken down and get some definition in the panel lines on the wings. Then a simple highlighting of the original color around the edge of each blob. Time-consuming, but good-looking. In hindsight, I guess that would be Commander Hindsight, the general who always loses but can see why after the fact. This result, without dots, was almost better looking than the one to come with the dots. Anyway, I wanted the dots, so I dotted away. I think maybe this could be done with a toothpick actually. Feels like that would have been smart. But I fiddled away with my brush as always, adding not only brown, sand and green blobs, but also dark and light grey blobs to add to the confusion. And there we have it. Even if the cloaking device happens to fail, this Tau will be invisible. I can see him standing there in a bush, surrounded by orcs who are curiously wondering why the bush keeps hitting them with a strangely oversized sword. Now I'm going to keep painting while talking a little bit about my coming choices of colour based on surface scratching the bottomless well of Warhammer 40k lore. Farsight, his name is in fact Shazo Viorola Shova Kais Montir. Put Count in front of it and you'll have a name that would please any respectful vampire. And he can be described as the Roman general who got too powerful, a threat to the Republic itself perhaps. He chose to leave instead of further instilling unrest and founded his own faraway enclave. When this was discovered, he was branded a rebel. The enclave, by the way, has its own symbol, and that is what's portrayed on Farsight's shield. His armour is red to honour the fallen soldiers of a past battle, but narratively it sets him aside as a rebel, as the other Tau folk usually sport white or ochre armour. And so I wanted to get some red markings going on the chap, staying at least slightly on track with the original Games Workshop narrative. It also kind of fits the alternative 1947 armour theme, like the red stripes on an imagined warplane or something. The XV-8 Crisis battlesuit with repulsor jet engines. Yeah, I know, it sounds like something worth at least a kidney. Is made out of future space alien technology dense nanocrystalline alloy. I have no idea what this looks like, so I figured Google should know. However, as the Tau are a figment of Games Workshop's imagination, the results were disappointing. Yet, there is iron-based nanocrystalline alloy aplenty to buy if you need something for the magnetic core of your power switch transformer. Explained in simple terms as an alloy consisting of homogeneously distributed ultrafine grains embedded in an amorphous matrix. Yeah. And in the pictures, it looks kind of like iron. And that would suit the 1947 look as well, sort of add an unpolished robot look rather than the high sci-fi polished look. For the legs, I tried this kind of new for me paint application, a little similar to the sponge technique but using the brush instead. Diluted grey paint in rather generous blobs that, when added in multiple bright layers, just like with a sponge, resulted in a sort of weathered or speckled zinc look. I liked that a lot. All in all, I think the grey metal complemented the look of 1947 quite well. This is also when we start seeing how great the green armour looks. When other details fall into place, it all looks more like a scheme and not just speckled green all over. A great example is the shield that looked kind of boring solely in green, but now looks like a proper miniature shield. I won't try and explain in any straightforward way how I attempted the brushed steel look on the massive sword. I've been fiddling with the non-metallic look for years and still go for the as long as it looks cool approach rather than any realistic reflections. I have no set plan or expertise. I just fiddle with some gradients and scratches until my mind tells me it looks cool. However, this is where I decided to go and grab a paint not in the World War II paint set. It's a magical sword, you see. Farsight nicked it from some old ruins or something, and it's made by ancient aliens. It's so sharp it cuts stone. Heard that story before. It also keeps the wielder from growing old. It kind of passes the life energy of the smitten onto the wielder, and is the explanation why Farsight is almost 3 centuries old. There's nothing like waking up in the morning feeling the joints ache, so you go out and chop someone's head off, instead of just settling for a strong coffee while mumbling about kids today and why coffee was actually better back in my day. Anyway, all this justifies some turquoise. It is, as we know, the proper color for any magic-y sword. I could then also take the opportunity to splash out and add some more sci-fi vibes on the gun and what I assume is a Tau iPad strapped to Farsight's right arm. Moving on in rapid succession now, even though there was nothing rapid with the process. I edge highlighted all of the green armor with the light Felgrau. This could have been done with an even brighter shade, but I enjoy the subtle touch here. And with that, the main body was done. Off camera, I also painted some browns on sword hilt and such. And suddenly, we're on the head. These Tau heads are quite stereotypical for the Tau design, and I quite like it. Always makes me think of a surveillance robot or something. I'd prime this brown, then simply added a brown wash to go on and proceed with light brown edge highlights. I don't know if you've noticed, you'd only perhaps do so if you've seen me paint for a longer period of time, but I've purposefully taken a more traditional Warhammer style approach to this entire paint job. True enough, I've hidden it in sponge stippling and camouflage, but this is the first time in ages that I have used a wash, for instance, and done proper edge highlights and so on, as well as paint the entire miniature relatively unaffected by a light source. What I mean by that is that I usually paint things so that they look like they're lit by an environmental light, like a cloudy sky or similar. This is not. There's no point to my decision of what style to paint apart from that the very important overall sensation of painting what I feel like in the moment. That definitely is one of the things that keeps me painting miniatures in the long run. Commander Farsight is now done. Something interesting I've noticed about his overall design is that the miniature looks better from above, or from an upward angle, rather than from the side. So this is more of a gaming piece than an Instagram piece, and this kind of makes me a little happy. Things should look cool on a gaming table, and this model certainly does. The fact that the shield is facing upwards is one of the major causes to this, but also how, when looking straight on, that sword steals up so much of the attention from the otherwise super cool battlesuit that can be seen better from above. I guess that's the only thing I kind of think is, well, a bit of a shame. The battlesuit is so cool, and the sword is just big. Now what's left is the base. Important thing, the base. It helps tell a story. By the way, apart from the tactical rock that takes up most of the base, the rest I filled out with some pieces of cork bark for more rocks, and then a layer of super glue that I sprinkled sand onto. With all the specialized products out there, sand has ended up slightly in the shadows of some forgotten past modeler's province. But it tends to be readily available, free, and works. And finally, I get to do some of my usual shenanigans. A wet blend of the reddish rifle brown and the sand color, with some grey in the shadows. My intentions are twofold. I think the arid yellow-red rock looks like a cool place for a rebel to stalk around hunting orcs. Also, I want a clean break from the miniature itself, with something that is contrasting the green of the armor, as well as something that's, nice and visible on the tabletop when gaming. A grey rock would have muddled up the whole scene, I think. To further create a complementing contrast to the green, I used the Rust Effects paint that comes in the paint set, watered down, to tint the rock into something more orange. And regarding the paints, I think most were great. The browns, Felgrau and greys were a treat to paint with. I'm a little reserved, however, to the camo sand and tanker grey. I'm guessing because there is more white mixed in or something, but I perceived them as grainy or chalky and did not flow off the brush in a manner that suits me. But obviously, as seen, you can paint miniatures with the paints, and not only Second World War German soldiers. As we're done, we're back where we started. Miniatures are created with concepts in mind. I think this mini would have been stunning in space sci-fi orange, or some other stereotypical sci-fi paint job. Ochre and white comes to mind. Do you think I ruined it by making it look like a Second World War German? Things have their time and place, perhaps. Or is a pink Gandalf cool? Would you consider painting your army in an alternative color scheme? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Commander Farsight will now move to his new location, a cabinet at the Great Alphaspel. I hope some of you have the time to go and see him one day. Thanks for watching, and please consider supporting my work with these videos on Patreon. YouTube is fickle nowadays, and the income from it doesn't even come close to covering the expenses I have making them, let alone the time it takes to make the videos, like the one you just watched. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed the time you spent here. Thanks for watching. Bye.